Hi, everybody. It's time for a Pesach story for you to listen to at your leisure. Today's story is called The Mouse in the Matzah Factory, and it's a very good book to tell you all about how matzah is made from the very beginning until it goes to your table. The Mouse in the Matzah Factory. Once, there was a little mouse who lived in a wheat field in the country. There he is. One day, men came and built a fence around the wheat field. Every day, they watched over the growing wheat. They watered the field, they pulled the weeds, and waited for the wheat to ripen. The little mouse watched too. The little mouse wondered what was so special about this wheat. When the wheat was ripe, the men cut it down. They worked carefully, making sure to keep the wheat very dry. They tied it into bundles and loaded it into a wagon. The little mouse decided to follow the wheat. Soon the wagon arrived at the mill. There it is. The little mouse poked around until he found a hole in the bottom of the door, and he crept inside. Huge grinding wheels were crushing the wheat into flour. Fine, fine flour. The millers carefully poured the flour into sacks and loaded them onto a truck. The little mouse jumped aboard the truck and hid among the sacks, wondering where the truck would take them. They drove for a long time. They left the country with its open fields and came to the big city. The little mouse peeked out. He saw tall buildings. He saw crowds of people. He heard the noise of the cars and the trucks on the street. At last, the truck came to a stop in front of an old building. Workers came to unload the sacks of flour. Quickly and quietly, the little mouse jumped down and followed. An inspector stood at the door checking to see that each flour sack was dry and tightly closed. The little mouse was afraid he would be discovered, so he climbed up to the window ledge and squeezed through a crack and hid behind the clock. He saw a large room with many people. They were all very busy. In one area, workers were unloading the sacks of flour. In another place, they were bringing in buckets of water. In the middle was a man with a mixing bowl. When the mixing man called out, the flour man scooped up a cup of flour from the sack, reached through a little window, and dumped the flour into the bowl. There it is. And when the mixing man called out again, the waterman filled his pitcher with water, passed it through his window, and poured the water into the bowl. The mixing man worked very, very quickly, mixing the flour and the water into a lump of dough. The little mouse watched. He wondered what was so special about this dough. The mixing man brought out the dough to another area where many people stood at a long table. He gave them a piece of dough to each person, and quickly, they rolled out their dough into circles. The circles were passed to another table where a woman poked holes into them with a special tool. She lined the circles on a rack near a brick oven. The baker slid the circles into the oven, and minutes later they were crisp and brown. A delicious smell filled the room as he took them out of the oven and placed them onto a rolling cart. All of a sudden, a bell rang. The people began to clean their work areas and scrub the tables, sanded down the rolling pins, and washed and dried the bowls. When they were finished, the mixing man reset the clock and called out for more flour and water. The little mouse couldn't resist the delicious smell. He followed the cart into a room where people were packing the baked circles into boxes and tying them with string. Families were standing in line to buy the boxes. He hopped onto the counter to take a peek. This is what he read. This matzah is made of wheat, which has been watched from the time of the harvest through the time of the baking. That's right, the little mouse thought. I watched this matzah. I watched this matzah from the time the wheat began to grow in my field. I watched it being harvested. I watched it being ground into flour. I watched it being mixed into dough. And I watched it being baked into matzah. The little mouse felt very important. He decided it was time to return to the country. Soon more wheat would be planted, and he wanted to be home in time to watch it all happen again. The end. I hope you like this story. And you remember that matzah that we eat, called shmura matzah, is matzah that has been watched from the time it was grown till the time it is baked. And the magic number for matzah, when you are baking it from the time the water and the flour touch each other, the magic number is 18. You have 18 minutes to work, to make your circles, to make the holes, to bake it, and for it to be all done. And when that timer rings, ding, your matzah needs to be finished, just like you saw in the book. Thank you for listening to The Mouse in the Matzah Factory. See you later.